All right, Emotep. So we're gonna do lesson 8, Marcus Garvey's course to African philosophy. I'm Onitaset Kumat, author of the Pro-Black Compendium and the Book of Power, and of course Zubiri and the Moons of Ma'ah. And this is This is the Pro-Black perspective on KWAZ Radio. So let's jump right into this. By the way, expect to have some commentary on this text. So I'm going to read the full lesson, but also expect a little commentary. If you're just joining us now, please like, subscribe, and share. But also, stay tuned. This is the 8th lesson. The other 7, were prior to this, and they're all worthwhile. I like it all, and definitely leave a comment. Let me hear from you. But let's keep going. So, society is an organization of mankind to safeguard and protect its own interest. Right? So, every society is an organization to safeguard and protect one's own interest. When society is organized, it is made evident by regulations, rules, and laws. Every member of the society must obey the said rules, regulations, and laws. This is just generally something that we have to understand, that when we are talking about building Pan-African nations, right? What we're talking about is organizing to safeguard and protect our interest, okay? And we're going to organize, and that organizing will be evident by our regulations, rules, and laws, and the obedience of our people toward that. Now, what that entails is, in itself, something to understand, because right now we're talking about like right now in my time at least, the conversation is on let's say police brutality and police and so on and so forth. But policing, what is obeying the rules, regulations, and laws, and what is not obeying the rules, regulations, and laws look like? Like these are fundamental questions that we have to come to understand if we're looking to establish for ourselves something to safeguard and protect our interests. But let's keep going. Therefore, always live up to the organized system of society of which you form a part. The only alternative to this is rebellion. Okay, you see what I'm saying? Like Garvey is everything, right? Well, he is a lot. You should never join rebellious movements against society except when there's a good reason and justification for it. So this is important. Garvey is usually saying, "Hey, look, let's be within the laws of whatever community we're in, unless there's a good reason for it." So, like I said, there's huge riots going on in 2020 for multiple reasons. There's huge protests in 2020 for multiple reasons. This is, he says, well, look, is there a good reason for it? Society is intended to maintain the greatest good for the greatest number. And this is something you have to understand too. The greatest number means the majority. Okay? Or not even, let's say it would be the plurality, to be honest. Okay? So the difference between majority and plurality is I'll just look it up for you real quick. But plurality, like just to give you a definition, obviously I know the word. The number of, okay, so it's more than any other, but it might not be the majority. Okay, so it would be the greatest number, the largest group, not necessarily the majority group. Yeah, majority being 51%. 50, like more than 50, over 50%, right? The plurality would be like you could have a plurality of 10% if every other group is 2%. You know what I'm saying? Like technically, if you were to be technical, either white men or white women are the plurality in America. You understand? Anyway, but let's keep going. So society is intended to maintain the greatest good for the greatest number, and that is always uppermost, so that in thought you may have to reform. Any society must be calculated to bring about the greatest good for the greatest number, and you must obey its laws. Otherwise, you are an evil genius living in the midst of that society, and the society will seek to destroy you or compel you to obey its rules, regulations, and laws. So this is pretty much insight into the African condition in the West. Okay, the African condition in the West is. Wait, hold on. Let me just type in the comment section. I'm gonna type Hotep. Tap. All right. The African condition in the West is that itself. That essentially we are compelled to obey their laws, and if we don't, they will seek to destroy or compel us to obey their laws. You know, they will seek to destroy us, and this is what you see in the Western world. Because again, the society is intended to maintain the greatest good for the greatest number, and you're the minority. You understand? Well, let's keep going. You cannot live by yourself in a society. You must live upon the goodwill of your fellows. Therefore, in that society, you must respect everything that tends to the good of all. You should always seek to have something at stake in the community in which you live, property of some kind, so as to merit the regard and respect of the community. Society, as it is organized into a community, counts first its worthwhile citizens before it thinks of others. So this is really important. A lot of us say, like, here's something that a lot of people say. They say, well, what good is this president compared to that president if the hood is still the same, right? The thing with the hood, if you go to the hood, you'll see that this property ownership is scant compared to the people, like compared to the amount of people there. Property ownership is scant. Okay, I'm not saying there isn't any property. Like I said, I used to organize in a particular hood, and there was a sister who owned a whole community center. Okay, a sister who owned the whole community center, and yeah, we used her space to host events. That's like she. And there was also like a church that was respected nearby too, right? Not she respected the church that was nearby. The reality though is that if you have property, you can get the regard and respect. But imagine if you don't have the property, right? Then that's disregard and disrespect. Okay. Remember, they count the worthwhile, but what are the people who are not worthwhile? I mean, you know the word. You know the word. When I'm saying this is something that you have to, like, this is broadening our thinking in regards to this whole situation. Well, the whole situation of African oppression, and this extends outside of the diaspora, obviously. In Africa, it's the worthwhile citizens who get a lot more than the citizens who aren't worthwhile. It's the citizens with property of some kind. And this is why, Garvey says, be a leader and get the thing. And again, if you go into my literature, you'll see me talk about elites. Okay? Elites. And what do elites have? Elites have property of some kind. They're the worthwhile citizens. In a large extent, societies are built around elites. Okay? The only question is, what's the consciousness of the elites? And that's the question that both Garvey and I are addressing. You as an African individual, you seek to be an elite, right? But have African consciousness. Okay? And use that African consciousness such that the governments where you are, particularly on the continent, the governments where you are treat you with that respect and that regard such that you influence, this greatest good, the greater good, such that you can influence the greater good, the greatest interest, the greatest influence, and transform the whole community towards benefiting and uplifting our race. It's a science to this stuff. This is why, like let's say, like I studied to be a scientist, right? This is why I'm in this. I'm in it to win it. You know what I'm saying? I'm in it to win it. So let's keep going. Property in a community is evidence of your status in the society of the community. If you have no property, have something of substantial value. The police, the officials, and the government recognize property holders as the citizens of first claim in an organized society. They are generally recorded to be identified. Therefore, you must teach the people to own property and to be known and recognized members of the community. All right. Remember, a lot of people do not like right now. Yeah, I mean, basically a lot of people do not own property, but property is probably one of the most important things to own. Or to and way how I look at it, less so as property is important. Property is important for an urban environment. Land is important in general, like as a general standard for property. Like in the African proverbial wisdom, we would tend to say, like, you have to own land. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to own land. Short of land, property. Okay, short of land, property, but you have to own land. That property is on land that you technically would own if you own property. But, well, not really, obviously, but, because of the way how America's, how some countries are set up, but we can continue. Always adopt a friendly attitude, and this right here, you're gonna be like, what the what? All right. Always adopt a friendly attitude. I can't even. Should I even read it? Should I just skip over it? All right. Anyway. Peace, brother. How you doing? Bit of medicines here. Should I skip over this Garvey? This Garvey thing right here? All right, let me just read it. Always adopt a friendly attitude. And by the way, this is Bit of Medicine podcast. He's on the live chat. You already know to check out what he's saying. His podcast. They're always good. And he has some master classes in that. So definitely check it out. I recommend. There's a business one. There's RJ, Mahdi. There's all sorts of stuff. Like you shouldn't skip out on a Bit of Medicine podcast. But let's keep going, guys. Always adopt a friendly attitude towards the police in your community. Oh my gosh, right? Because the police is that civil body of officials who are supposed to protect the citizens and see that their rights are not infringed upon. Oh my gosh. All right. You should always welcome the police. The police are never the public enemy, but the public protector. Come on. All right, so we have to understand why he's saying this. Now, generally speaking, you have to realize that Garvey does two things. One is that Garvey has to. All right, he's saying if you're a leader, if you're going to be a leader, right, you have to. All right, actually, he's going to explain it. The reason being that if you're in a freaking nation, generally speaking, all right, here, let's put it this way. If you were in a black community, this wouldn't even be an issue. You'd be like, yes, the black police and I work hand in hand. The issue is that you're in a situation where you're a minority, a propertyless minority with no, there's no interest, and the police are kind of just there to keep you content with, or to keep you from destroying everything, which is, obviously something that you wouldn't mind doing. As evinced by, the view out my window, right? No. But seriously, friendly to police in your community. Garvey, but you have to understand that if you're a minority in a situation, or if you're a vulnerable population, you don't, this does not, if you're looking to, because again, Garvey is trying to create leaders who obviously repatriate, obviously build nations on the continent. You don't need to be fighting the people here. You don't need to be dying and getting imprisoned over here. Abroad. You don't need to be dying and getting imprisoned abroad when you can be alive and free at home. Okay? You don't need to encourage your people to put their energy in towards dying and being imprisoned abroad when they can be free and alive at home. It's a question of where does your energy go. The other thing that you have to remember is that Garvey has that poem. Again, I published it in the pro-black compendium, where it was about the tragedy of the white injustice, or something like that, right? He tells you, look, in public you would say good things about white folk, but in private you understand who he is. All right. your public persona, if you make an enemy of the police, and I think he's gonna speak about this, if you make an enemy of the police, you you essentially, you kind of forfeit, your position in that community. And you'll see that a lot of, we talk about these political prisoners, a lot of them have been in prison for like 40, 50 years. You understand? A lot of them have been in prison because that's legal in a community to just imprison people for, particularly in this community, it's legal to imprison people for 40, 50 years for having, let's say political radicalism. So the question is, do you want to be imprisoned in America? Do you want to die in America? Or do you want to be alive in Africa, right? And be the one imprisoning people in Africa. You see what I'm saying? There's a huge difference. So on this, it's hard to say. Obviously, you can tell a lot of us are not Garveyites in America, based off of this. But at the same time, like it is what it is. Uh, yes, sir. All right, let's keep going. You should help the police to. Oh my gosh! All right. Like it's hard to say this one. All right, you should help the police to maintain order because if the community loses its peace, you will have riots and probably bloodshed. Okay, no lies told. No peaceful citizen wants to be caught in such a dangerous state of public affairs. So, like, I think it's worthwhile to explain to everybody what's going on in America. So here's what's happening in America. This gentleman was killed named George Floyd, murdered in plain sight, open like plain sight. Like he was on a street corner, and some white overseer left his knee on this man's neck for something like 9 minutes, strangled him in broad daylight. Okay, the video's on the internet. I didn't watch the whole thing, but as far as I understand, he cries out to his mother before dying. And what happens after is nothing. The officer who kills him just shrugs his shoulders and walks away. Eventually, the video surfaces because there was a 17-year-old, or either 17 or 18-year-old, sister who was recording it and pleading with the white overseer to get his knee off of the guy's neck because he's killing the man. And the guy was like, and the officer's looking at her like, I don't give a shit. Like, what are you gonna do something. Anyway, the video surfaces. The overseer is fired. That's it. He's just fired. So eventually there are, it's just a huge mentality of huge protests, so on and so forth. Now these protests go, not just protests, but then eventually riots happen. Now, why would riots happen and why would looting happen? These things are really important these are really important questions to ask. Riots would be because the police, like it's right here actually. The police maintain order in a community, right? The police are supposed to maintain order, but if they're stretched thin, because they have to attend to protests and they have to attend to this, and not just that, they're also being repelled by the community. Then you have to understand that when it comes to the communities in the West, so there was this other thing, there was this other passage I read that crime is like sociogenic. Okay, crime is created by society. Crime is not an individual act, it's created by society. So what happens is that in a criminal society, you will always have criminal elements. If the police are now stretched thin, then yes, you will have people taking advantage of the scarcity of the police. Okay, not just that. I mean, obviously there's like a need to have a moral outrage. There's a need to, like you don't have to necessarily be a criminal to do. You don't have to be like a career criminal to do something. But of course, you have to realize there are also career protesters. There are career activists. There are all sorts of individuals, at this point in time, who have like careers in doing certain things. And criminality is no different. But yeah, essentially, if the police are stretched thin, because the police are here, like the police maintain order over, like, and they have enough people to maintain order over black people, right? In black communities. they do not have enough people to maintain order for everybody, or for a lot of white people. And so what happens is that white people join in these protests, and the police are stretched thin. And the police are stretched thin, and then you have these riots and so on and so forth. I mean, that's not all there is to it, but of course, now when it comes to looting, the question of looting is something important. Like it's something that you want to do in the sense of hoarding. Like you have to hoard goods when riots happen. When disorder comes, you want to have goods. You want to have goods to exchange, goods to, and then you want to have the availability of food. Because, for instance, right now, if I want to go to a store local to me, which wasn't looted, it was just boarded up, I can't go in there. So whatever I wanted, like let's say if I need soap, or if I need soap, or if I need paper towel or something, I can't go in there. So if I had looted it beforehand, which is, let's not say I would do that, but or let's say I wouldn't do that, because again, it depends on where you are on the hardship scale. If you're a lot of the maintaining order that the police have is maintaining order over people going through a lot of hardships. Okay, and yes, hardships by an American standard, but hardships nonetheless. If and again, like hardships. And I shouldn't even say hardships by American standard. You have to understand that not every... Like one time I visited some woman, like a dating situation, and I looked in her fridge, and it was empty. Like I've never seen something so barren. Like no food. This is like the situation that some people live in. Now... And that's like a hardship. So yes, in the sense of, hey, look, my fridge is empty and there's rioting, and these stores are all going to be closed for like another week or even a month. It's imperative for survival. It's like a survival imperative to actually attain goods from the outside. It's imperative. Because otherwise, what are you going to do? If no one is going to be servicing that community for a while, what do you do? So again, no peaceful citizen wants to be caught in such a dangerous state of public affairs. And again, it's like you might not even be a part of, like you have to understand, right? So never join to incite public disorder. And he's saying as a leader, see, keep away from it and be innocent to all that happens by way of revolution. Okay? Never allow the UNIA's name to be mentioned as among rioters. You will destroy the usefulness of the organization in that community and may cause suspicion to the cast upon it in other communities. So this is actually a pretty interesting passage, because right now when there are protests and riots, with the exception of Black Lives Matter, which is getting a whole bunch of fanfare now, but with the exception of BLM, you don't really see the traditional black organizations out there. So you do not see quote unquote ADOS leadership. You do not see the Nation of Islam. You do not see the Black Israelites. You do not see any of these organizations. You hardly see any of these celebrities. Most of these celebrities are going against it because a lot of people expect, which not unreasonably, they expect things to go back to normal, to go back to the status quo, go back to pretty much black people being on the underclass and white people servicing them. I mean, white people, paying all the bills, if you will. And if white people are paying all the bills, you don't want to be so on and so forth. Now, of course, white people are associating themselves with the movement, because again, like there are long-term or short-term ramifications to anything going on. Global movement, you want to be on the, like corporations are like, okay, we'll be a part of this global movement. Because they expect peace to come back, if you will, and they expect to be some sort of short-term ramifications for being quiet. But again, this is something that is interesting, in so much as black people, as much as black organizations are like they're invisible at this moment. And that's something to understand. So always disavow any attempt to label the UNIA with riotous behavior. Whatever object is desired in a civilized community, it can always be achieved by the approach of good reason and good judgment. Always use good reason and good judgment. So I mean, it's questionable, but we'll see. Because again, like I said, the officer in question, with regards to the riots in America, he was just able to just walk. Not only was he able to walk, okay, like he just continued being a police until the video surfaced, and then he was fired. That's it, just fired. Eventually, there were riots, like for 4 days. He had now there's like a just to give context. There's a coronavirus pandemic, so there's a huge plague going around. Not huge plague, but there's like a really viral, like you can't, like they don't want you moving too much. They were able to get him from one state to another, like a distant state. So he's in Minnesota. He was able to travel to Florida, which is several miles away, like thousands of miles away. Well, I wouldn't say, I don't really know, but I mean I can look it up, but I don't really care. He was able to go from Minnesota to Florida, okay, during a time where air travel and road travel is very limited. Well, for us, I mean for regular citizens, it's very limited. They were able to transfer this person to another state, thousands of miles away. On top of this, so after they transferred him, they gave him like over 100 police officers defending his home. Okay, over 100 police officers defending his home. What this means is, and this is before, so after 4 days, and they finally arrest him. They finally arrest him and put him in custody or whatever, right? Of riots. But if it weren't for the riots, then probably nothing would have happened. He probably would have continued working after straight up killing a person. They eventually gave him a charge of third-degree murder. They said, hey, look, even though we saw you strangle a man on the street, and you strangled him in front of police officers, you strangled him in front of witnesses, you strangled him on video camera, we're going to say you did not murder him, really, as much as he had pre-existing conditions. And the medical examiner said, yeah, the guy had pre-existing conditions. Right? They finally upgraded it to the second degree. I mean, it's a constantly growing story, but the point being that, there's a huge amount of outrage in regards to, just how audacious and how much audacity these white police officers have. But again, and the main reason why it is such is because, like, unfortunately, white people came in and said, hey, you know what, this is kind of bullshit, and you'll see it, and a lot of black people will be a lot of black people kind of on the sidelines are like, why is this happening? But you have to remember that white people are organized. Like, they go to weekly meetings. You know what I mean? Like, they already go to, like I said, they are career activists. They are career protesters. They're already organized for whatever is the next event. I've been going to police brutality things for like a decade, and but I went as an individual. I've seen organizations show up all the time. Like white organizers, with pamphlets and all that stuff. They show up all the time. And one of my friends has been in one of those, white socialist organizations for a decade. They've been grooming her for a decade, So, I mean, she's not really my friend, but, Anyway, but let's keep going. Let's see. So you are not in a community to overthrow the law in that community. You are there to live under the law. The national aspiration of the race is to find expression, not in revolution where you are established when you are under other people's governments, but to accomplish the end in Africa. Therefore, never preach rebellion, because you will disrupt the society in which you live, and it will crush you. Okay? So this is pretty much the sentiment here, like, a lot of us, this is Garvey saying, real talk. Your ambition is not foreign. It's not abroad. It's at home. So like this is I used to be in like home movements, like movements at home, and I realized, no, you can't do it at home. You have to go abroad. I used to be moving abroad. All right. And I realized, no, you have to go home. You have to go home if you want anything. Abroad is just to help you get home. Like abroad, like here abroad, I could collect some money. You know what I mean? Like, I can make money, right? But I use it at home. That's it. Because preaching rebellion, right? And then, just being crushed You know, I'm not saying, and this is the thing too. Remember too, it's like you have to realize that white people are the majority, and by the majority, what I mean is this: even if the protests were to beat out these police, right, which is possible. I mean, it's impractical, but it's possible, right? Because there's a document circulating among the police themselves, which are just whining like, "Oh, this is too much. Why can't we get any support from the city?" You know, so like they're really impacted by this. And like I said, you know, you check out the Discord. I put the document up on the Discord. You know, but yeah, you know, the reality is this: that afterward, like let's say somehow this wins, right? Somehow these protesters win out. Most of the protesters are white. You understand? So if they are white and that they're going to set up another white government, and your idea that they're just going to set you up to be in a perfectly well-off space, well-to-do space, you without any property, you without any knowledge of institutions, they're just going to set you up to be the next leadership. You know, I mean, sure, maybe Obama, but outside of Obama, no, it's not going to be, you know, whomever from like, you know, it's not going to be your neighbor from wherever. It's going to be them. They were working for like I said, I was in a socialist organization for like, I mean, I like 10 years ago, and they were just talking about, you know, like they studied Lenin for like decades. Okay, they studied Lenin for decades, how to set up a provisional government and blah 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 blah. And they're like, if they won out, right? They have literature as to their post-revolution. You don't have a post-revolutionary vision per se for America. Like that's very, and even if you did, the reality is that you were not the majority of the fighters. You see, and if you weren't the majority of the fighters, and not just that, the white people who are going to oppose you, who are going to oppose whatever vision you may think you have, they out-organize you and outgun you. You get what I'm saying? So you might say, like, let's say in some fantasy world, you feel like, oh, well, all right, during the negotiations, we're going to say, oh, we're going to get Mississippi, right? The white folk in Mississippi are going to say, no. All right, let's go on. Like, I mean, that's all it is. The highest service a citizen can refer to in a community or organized society is to maintain and preserve peace. When the peace is disturbed, it is likely that anybody may get hurt, and sometimes most innocently. Never join the mob. You will most likely be shot or injured, even though you may only be curious. You know, and I'm actually thinking about looking at this mob, but I know these white boys is waiting. Because I'm curious. I'm like, yo, let me see this chick. But, well, right now I don't do it because my boy is with me. I mean, as you can tell from me always talking about it. But, yeah. But, yeah, I tell you, man. But, sure, knowing the people I know, I might be shot by somebody besides from the police. Anyway, let's say, if you are shot or injured in the riots demonstration, it is almost always evidence against you that you are one of the rioters, so keep away. When the riot act or martial law is read or proclaimed in your community, keep indoors. Look at that. It's like, I was like, what? Like, when did he write this? Give this advice to the people. Never join a mob in a foreign country, under a foreign government, or where you have very little political influence. You see, this is like, yeah, oh my gosh, Garvey. But anyway, this is as you can see, this is a really excellent book. So let me tell you about another excellent book. Today's your lucky day because we're going to do some ads. All right, we're going to do Change the Leader to Lead the Changes. This is Baba Oni. No, Oni singing a song. Let's do it. Okay, so I know books. All right, so let me tell you about a book. Book of Power. All right, check it. So the goal and objective is to be selective, elective for knowledge with the black directive, checking sources, heritage, and legacies.
with the brilliance to defeat our nemesis. The book of power, so aptly named, esteemed and famed for informing the brain and doing the same as the ancestors before us. Sankofa, that's the life chorus. Wisdom is the key against dangers. Either change the leaders or lead the changes. We are due in Africa with no strangers. Do you hear us? Okay, hold on. We can't continue to beat the second fiddle. African power is the end of this riddle. Let's build a nation the likes which never existed. The motto heretofore, we persisted. Better, we resisted. Best, we building. We'll raise the roof and break through the ceiling. Peeling away the chains we were given to stop just surviving, start thriving and living. Africa's about to host superpowers. China and US back up in time hours. No one can be free without freeing themselves. But freedom is shown and owned on bookshelves. The book of power, a key for liberation. There's no domination where there's education, because ignorance is man's main weakness. All of exploited the weak don't teach this. Then the pages of sages, kings and queens. Akapong, Delaney, Dessalines, Nyere, Garvey and Zinga and Cooks. 500 pages surpassing most books. The task is told to bring up a continent. You will hold the tone for the confident. Have some pride and push forward your chest. Your leaders are reading one of the best. The book has science, covers violence, self-reliance, and does away with silence. The time has come for the work to get done and build up a land that is second to none. We'll organize, technologize, strategize a new Africa before our eyes, and blackness will be the complexion we see anytime we envision what it means to be free. So come join minds, read what is written. Here be solutions, no longer hidden. Nothing works in theory, all that works, works and works. So it's time to put ourselves first. Change the leaders and lead the changes. Tell your friends, family, and neighbors. Change the leaders and lead the changes. Tell your friends, family, and neighbors. Change the leaders and lead the changes. Tell your friends, family, and neighbors. Change the leaders and lead the changes. Book of Power.
Book.
So the Book of Power can be purchased on Amazon. Just click on the link below. Alright? Send me on tap. Tulende ma'a, tushinde is fat. Tulende ma'a, tushinde is fat. Tulende ma'a, tushinde is fat. Hotep.
Yeah, I'll tell you, man. Alright. So let's go. Political poll. So politics is a science of government that protects those human rights that are not protected by law. Okay? Law is already established. Politics adds to the laws or change the laws. You should play politics to get good government. The state, nation, or the community in which you live directly is always governed by politicians or statesmen. You should know them and become well acquainted with them for your own good. You need them in trouble and out of trouble. Always try to know the mayor of your city and the government of your state, island, or country. By the way, that's the Discord. Discord's popping off. Alright. Always try to know the mayor of your city and the government of your state, island, or country. Try to know the other government officials also. To know them before you have trouble is to get help when you are in trouble. Not to know them is to be at disadvantage when you are brought before them. Always treat them courteously and friendly, even if you don't mean it. Always let them believe you are friendly. And this is actually important. You have to realize that you're being ruled by people. Like, you're being ruled by people. The government is comprises people. So, yeah, people. You know, if you act friendly to people, they act friendly back, pretty much, in general, more or less. If you are to be a leader in your community, this makes it even more imperative that you know everybody of political consequence, because you will have to approach them not only for yourself and for the organization, but for the members of the race who look up to you as their leader. So, again, you know, now, if you're going to be abroad, then get to know the leadership get to know your local leadership. That's what's being said, because essentially you would have to go to that local leadership for whatever it is you want. Now, again, Garvey says this before the crackdown, in a sense. You know, there's a crackdown on black interest, and Garvey is saying this before the crackdown. But again, it's kind of you know, it's almost like you know, we can say that roughly, but it's just us talking, you know, in the sense of reality is that you can get a minority like loan. You could get a loan for whatever, like if you're doing something noble in the sense of like something within the paradigm of that community, you could get a grant for it. You could get a loan for it. It's not to say that they don't like. I mean, because you're not gonna do like if you're thinking of well, they're not gonna let us separate, well, they're not gonna pay us reparations. Yeah, they're not. Like obviously, but what? That's something that people actually say these times. They're like, oh, if you're protesting, but you don't really want us to have reparations. Yeah, why would we want to give you a bunch of money? Where does that even make any sense? But if you're talking about, let's say, building a school, they could give you a grant for that. Even if it's an Afrocentric school, if it means that the kids graduate into, to go to college, yeah, and it fits around the curriculum that's already established, yeah, they would give you a grant for that. If you want to make a charter school, you can get a grant for that. So it's not to say that, because a lot of us kind of are dismissive of white folk, blanketly dismissive, but it's a matter of coming to reality. Like there are plenty of black businesses around where I'm at, and obviously most of them are established through bank loans. Is there redlining? Is there illegal? Yeah, absolutely, but this more or less has to deal with this is something that it's complicated, but it's not. I mean, it's present, but it's not omnipresent. If that makes sense, it's present, but it's not omnipresent. Would for instance, would I be denied rent, like ability to rent in a certain neighborhood? Absolutely. Would I be denied ability to rent in every neighborhood? No. You understand? Like, and obviously that's clear as day. But this is the question. Like, are you going to be like you can do things abroad? Okay, you can do things abroad. But let's keep going. You must never sell yourself to the politician. Now this is important. You must get around him in the most skillful manner. Get all your rights and the right of others dependent upon you out of him without selling yourself to him to keep him in office, especially if he's not a good man in the community. Always make your voice count for bringing about the reforms you and others think are right for your community. Never exchange it for money. You should see that every citizen that has a vote does vote on election day, especially when you have reforms to be enacted. So isn't that interesting? A lot of Garveyites are saying don't vote. And Garvey himself is like, yeah, we're going to vote. But I mean, that's just the thing that you have to understand. Like, Garveyism is about, if you're abroad, it's about using the resources abroad to improve home. Home being Africa. If you are home, then it's about using the resources at home to improve Africa. It's the focus is at home. The focus is home. The focus is on Africa. The question of, I'm not going to vote because blah, blah, blah. It doesn't get better for people. It's not going to get better for people in America. You're not supposed to be concerned about making it better for people in America insofar as if you make it better. I mean, you're not supposed to be concerned about directly making it better for people in America or abroad. You're not supposed to be concerned about directly making it better for them. But if you directly improve Africa, you will indirectly improve America. Okay? If you have, for instance, and this is, like I say, you look at the Book of Power, if you have a powerful nation in Africa, that powerful nation can very, very easily, okay, import, well, let's say immigrate people from abroad. It could very easily take refugees from people from abroad. So if you are a refugee of political violence or police brutality in America, you can then, apply for refugee status in that Pan-African nation on the continent. And then with that refugee status, you can be set up with a good life away from the harm America does. You understand? In another sense, you can, if you guys remember, I know most of you watch Black Panther. In the film Black Panther, it ends with Wakanda, this mythical nation, building up a science center, like a science, I don't remember what it is, but like a technology thing in the hoods of America. So that's another possibility, that if you're a powerful nation in Africa, you can set up schools, like private schools in America, right? And give the youth of America, like you give them social services that are otherwise unavailable to them, or otherwise not up to par for them. You could build schools abroad, which is something that kind of like in the vein of the Catholic churches and so on and so forth. Who build schools abroad. The white people will build schools abroad. In the name of their nations, you could do the same in America. Easy. You understand? The culture of Africa can be propagated and spread in America. So let's say we're doing Ma'at and we're really practicing Ma'at in Africa. Like we're gonna give the name for the nation. Let's gonna say Ankobia, right? You have the Ankobia nation, right? That they're practicing Ma'at beautifully, right? Now they can send missionaries to America, and in sending missionaries, that missionary, you don't want to use that term missionary, obviously, but what I'm saying is, those individuals are now promoting Ma'at among black folk with the financial backing of a powerful nation, and the morals and standards and so forth are being improved in America. So what I'm saying is that you can indirectly impact the abroad. So if you're just voting and you want reforms and all that, like there's nothing wrong with that if you're abroad, and it's even better if you're not abroad. If you're at home and you're voting and you're getting reforms, like let's say you have the Ankobia nation, you're getting reforms in that community. You see what I'm saying? Or even if you're not in the Ankobia nation, if you're just inside one of these Askari nations, and you're voting, but you're getting things to go to the Ankobia nation. You understand what I'm saying? It's like you want to focus on building that Ankobia nation. That's all it is. And anything outside of that, like, don't even sweat it. Your focus is how do we give more to the good people in Africa? How do we become the good people in Africa? And how do we give more to those people? That's really the question. Because otherwise what you have is that they're going to be giving to the Askari in Africa, the Askari nations in Africa, and not just giving to the Askari nations in Africa, but they're going to be giving to the Askari. And they're gonna like, as opposed to the Ankobia, and what that does is that it makes the fight in Africa that much more difficult. So there's a lot at stake, and this whole I mean, I'm not disagreeing. Like if you want to, if you wanna give a try at burning it down, burning down the West, whatever, give it a try, I guess. But like, I mean, if you win. Like I said, the white people are the majority, so it would be like they're the majority. So it would be an interesting thing if you being out-organized, outgunned, somehow become the leadership of a new Africa. New America. It would be interesting. I don't see how it would happen. I don't think I can walk outside and become the leadership of this rebellion. Of white people. I don't think that after in the imaginary situation, which I mean it's possible, in the possible situation of white people or of this this rioting becoming an insurrection and so on and so forth, and then setting up a provisional government, I don't think that these white people will say, hey, who can draft some laws for us? Who can draft a constitution for us? I know. Oni can draft a constitution. Oni and the good, and Koku and so on and so forth, and Wanda and all that. Like these people can draft up this constitution and rule over us. No, I don't think that's going to happen. Like, I do not think that's going to happen. Now, if it does happen, now, sure, I guess I'll take the job, right? But I mean, it's improbable. It's improbable. Like a series of unlikely events would have to happen such that this quote unquote insurrection like benefits the cause of Pan-African nationalism, like a huge series of events. But let's keep going. Whatever the conditions may be that give you suffrage, live up to those conditions to maintain and hold suffrage, because just at the time when you vote is most needed, may be the time when you are not qualified to vote because of your carelessness. In countries where, as a race, you are not allowed to vote, always work to get the vote by way of reform. Use the help of everybody. Use the help of everybody. Again, this is another thing that we have to understand. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party are coalitions. These are coalitions. This is why you do not see black people being the sole beneficiary of voting, because these are coalitions. They are not. They are not like that. That's the thing that we just don't seem to grasp. Generally speaking, that in essence, like for instance, the Republican Party we know is the religious right. There's the NRA nutcases. It's the the Trump bigots or whatever, and so on and so forth. And then the Democrats, they are the LGBT community. They are the labor unions. They are quote unquote black interests and Latino interests and so on and so on, women's interests. Like these are coalitions, and some people obviously fall into different categories. Like you might have a white woman who might not necessarily might be into women's interests more so than gun rights or more so than religious rights. So these are just coalitions. So he says use the help of everybody, because you have to understand that when you're the minority, because everybody is a minority. The gun right people are, and the Second Amendment people are a minority. The religious rights people are a minority. So on and so forth. The only thing, so they all do a coalition in a sense, to be quote unquote conservative and liberal, right? But the coalition is the Democratic Party, the Democrats and the Republicans, and so when he says use the help of everybody, it's an understanding of realistically speaking, the idea that you're going to be able to do it alone, as a small percentage of the population is just unlikely. It just doesn't add up. But let's keep going. But have political power to bring about the changes that will give you the vote. Otherwise, you'll be governed without your consent. So without government, without the vote, you'll be governed without your consent. And again, now the vote. I should say this because I have to say this. The vote, it's not a matter of who casts the ballot as much as who counts the ballot. To be fair with everything, if you did not know, like for instance, in New York City, the police count the vote. You understand? Like I've worked at the election sites. I'll admit it. When you work at the election site, you spend the whole day, giving, you spend the whole day registering votes and whatever. Then you tally it up and you have all that stuff. And at the end of the day, what you do is you give it to the police. You give all the ballots and everything to the police, and then they count it up somewhere. You know what I'm saying? So it's like in a sense, it really is a matter of are you really voting? We don't know. But if you, technically I would think so. But again, there was this instance where Hillary Clinton got 100% of the votes in the Democratic primary against Obama in Harlem, right? Which doesn't make any sense. Harlem's a historically black area, and for 100% of the votes to go to Hillary Clinton, yeah, it's yeah. So and again, like I said, when I had the Freedom Party, we collected a whole bunch of signatures. We collected enough signatures, and then we only got a third of the votes. And of course, people weren't obligated to vote because they signed a petition for us to be on the ballot. But we expect sabotage. We expect sabotage, and particularly because the gubernatorial candidate, the governor candidate, specifically was a saboteur. Did I know that beforehand? No. My chairman said he suspected it, and that kind of I was I don't want to be a part of this anymore. But yeah, voting and all that stuff is pretty important. So anyway, let's keep going. But I would still say, yeah, I would vote, because again, it's 10 minutes of your, well, not 10 minutes, like 20 minutes of your day, and it's once every every year, I think, once a year. 20 minutes of your day once a year is not like, it's not the end of the world. And again, you would put into, like, maybe some ballots aren't counted. Some ballots probably are. So in that regard, they're like you have an opportunity. Like, you have an opportunity, I would just use it. Again, it's just 20 minutes once a year. It's not the end of the world. If you're so busy that you do not have 20 minutes, then again, you could just walk with this podcast in your ear and just do the ballot like that. You know what I'm saying? like use the time you're spending listening to this podcast. Although I guess it's not 20 people listening, but use that time to just whatever. Just play it in your ear, do the vote, and you kill two birds with one stone. All right, which a horrible thing to say. But all right, let's see. Otherwise, you'll be governed without your consent. To vote is to make the attempt to share in the government of the community. You should never be a political slave in a community because others will take advantage of you. Always cast your ballot for good government. Never support a corrupt government. So, this is important. Now, this is actually kind of hard to do. It's actually kind of hard to do if you're in America. Right, let's keep going. Approach the government. Always make your government know about your presence. Never hide from the government. Whenever possible, seek an interview with the government on behalf of the people you lead. This is something I gotta listen to. Never hide from the government. I'm just kind of like, I don't want you in my business. You guys, but again, remember that Garvey comes before a time of COINTELPRO. Okay, like he comes at the inception of COINTELPRO. Like the guy who starts out COINTELPRO, J. Edgar Hoover, he begins his career kind of trying to sabotage and destroy the UNIA. Okay, so Garvey would kind of be like, oh, don't hide out, don't worry about the government's not, not the case. COINTELPRO, these people are, like I said, arresting, like, they're political prisoners, 50 years. They're assassinating people. They're like, this is not the kind of people you just want to be like, hey, what's up? How are you doing? Real talk, I say, look, just get out. Just get out. I wouldn't even, like, if I am here, and like I am here. So if I'm here, I'll vote. I'll whatever. But there's certain risk involved with staying in America. Not just police brutality. Or not just, being killed during an arrest. Like, it's a lot of risk. But let's keep going. Let's keep going. Always impress upon the government that your movement is not to controvert the established order of the government, but that your people seek a homeland in Africa, which is not to be achieved by revolution in the country in which you domicile as a citizen, but if possible, it is to be achieved with the cooperation of the government. So that's pretty interesting. Carlos A. Cook's actually later attempts to get the government to support the repatriation bill, and the government in question says, that the black folk here will not support that, but if you can get the black folk here to support that, sure, we'll support it. But yeah, like, this is the point. Your point is to seek a homeland in Africa, not necessarily to be like do revolution in America, because again, what is that revolution going to do for you? Now, granted, if that revolution were to make it so that the new government will cooperate with you in regards to going to Africa, that's a different story. But it doesn't seem like the people interested in quote unquote revolution or insurrection in this country are interested in seeking a homeland in Africa. And that's really the question. But let's keep going. Leave all policies on international character affecting the organization to the international officers. Don't complicate yourself with your government. Constitutional political now, actually, let me just read this because this might feel like it's skipped over. International character affecting the organization to the international officers. So let's say if you're in an organization, then there's multiple ways to look at this. You could say the international officers that are not in the organization, or the international officers that are in the organization. The international officers that are in the organization, he's saying if you're a leader of an organization, then leave that international stuff to the international officers. And another thing is that you wouldn't complicate it, like you wouldn't go to the government and talk about one thing when there's somebody else, if it's not you, somebody else who's already talking to your government about this stuff. You know, like don't even complicate. Like the government should say, like you have to have a semblance of organization if you are in an organization. You see what I'm saying? Like do what you're trained to do, or do what you're expected to do. So constitutional political agitation is not a riot. If you are a citizen, you have a right of public assembly. You have the right to protest against anything that is politically wrong, but it does not suggest that you must riot, because good government always puts down riots. So this is actually important to understand. People are talking about how Obama, he put down the Ferguson riots. Well, yeah. I don't understand what you think Obama was supposed to do. Let it burn. Let everything burn. Fuck, you know, like he's the president of the United States, and you expect him to be like, yeah, let everything burn. Like, come on. Like, it's not like the issue with us as a people is like our political maturity is wanting. You know, our political maturity is wanting. So like saying Obama didn't like riots. Obama has the National Guard. Yeah, he has the National. Like what? Like that's a part of his powers. Anyway, good government always has a way to settle its political difficulties in the interest of society and the community of which you are a part and of which you have a voice in. When you riot against your government, you are rioting against yourself, because the government cannot exist without you. That is why there's a constitution. When the constitution is insufficient to give you all the protection you need, change it by political action. Vote for change. Do not riot for change. Okay, well that's it. And it's actually pretty interesting, because I didn't expect... I didn't know rioting was mentioned in this. I kind of forgot. I feel like I don't know. I didn't like riot. Kind of hits home more at this point in time. So I'm actually pretty impressed that Garvey discussed that. But that's the end of lesson 8, social systems. That's the end of lesson 8, social systems. We're going to get into lesson 9 another day, diplomacy. But for what it's worth, you know, I'm grateful for everyone who listened. Thank you, Asante Sana, to Bitter Medicine Podcast, who stuck it through with me. But yeah, family, thank you so much for listening. Definitely like, subscribe, share, and you know the Discord is there. We're having some active conversations right now. A lot of stuff on this on these protests, a lot of stuff on these riots. A lot of stuff is being shared, and we're having, and you know, come through on Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you haven't been verified on the come through, and you know we'll give you the black quiz, and you know you'll be able to come and see the financial. You know, we're talking about different stocks. We're talking about different businesses we could support and all that. Here's Demetrios Hilton. Thanks for this, brother. I'm gonna enjoy the playback. Yeah, Asante Sana for listening, and I'll hear from you guys another day and another time. But Shem Hotep, and you know, Tulende Ma'at, Tushinde is fat, and Nitaya too.